Ya lo hace. Pierna derecha, directo al arco. ¡Golazo! ¡Golazo!
The world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee, live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
Good day, good night, and welcome to Soccer Today for Monday, August 6th, 2018. Welcome back to the show. Thanks to Duane, Rudy Schuler, James Grossi, and Simon Fudge for holding the fort last week while I was on the beach. Good morning, Duane.
Good morning. We also had a very brief cameo from Kurt Larson, so we should thank him too. He wasn't aware he was on the show, but he did make an appearance on the show, as did Max the dog.
Nice. Kurt Larson, the new director of communications and digital content for the Canadian Premier League. I'm sure we're going to hear from Kurt in the next few weeks. We're back live. First of all, thanks for staying with us over the last week. Subscribe on podcast or live on our YouTube page, youtube.com/sports podcasting network, to always catch our live shows and our podcast versions as well. Duane, we had a game this weekend that saw a trophy being won, the first trophy in the European season, the Community Shield. Of course, we'll talk about the MLS and Canadian Review. I don't think we'll talk about the All-Star game that much, but we'll talk about the Canadian Review in the second segment of the show. But Manchester City, best team in England, I guess, to start this season.
We're going to win a plate. We're going to win a plate. And now you're going to believe us. And now you're going to believe us. We're going to win a giant silver plate. Yeah, that was being sung at the famous Opera Brobs yesterday as the final seconds ticked down. A little tongue-in-cheek because no one quite knows what to make of the Shield each year when you watch it, when your team's in it. And I'm sure this is what I always say to people that dismiss it outright is, you have to win something pretty big to get to the game. So it is kind of a celebration of that. But yeah, I thought it was you don't want to get too caught up in analyzing the game too much because it is ultimately a preseason game plus, is what I would call it,
Yeah,
it's a little bit more.
A gala game, like an exhibition with a little trophy at the end. So it's almost more a celebration at the beginning of the season than anything else. Yeah.
Like when you fly somewhere and they have that new category, like it's not quite economy plus. Yeah, this is an economy plus kind of game. City played very well. I think you have to acknowledge that, and I don't think anyone's surprised by that. Aguero with 2 goals in the game to go over 200 all time for City. That's impressive on its own. City's first win of the Shield in 7 years. Chelsea, you should tell me up there, has lost, 5 in a row or something?
5 straight Community Shield loss for Chelsea. The last 5 times they were in that tournament. Well, that tournament. In that game, they lost all 5 times, and it didn't change this time around. Granted, they were missing 6 players, their top 6 players who are still on vacation from the World Cup, back in the training today, but the Courtois, Hazard, and William and company. William was playing in this weekend, but a lot of great players for Chelsea weren't playing. That doesn't take anything away from Manchester City, though. They played well, even not a first-choice player like a Bernardo Silva, who was going to probably fight for a starting spot in the next few weeks. Did a beautiful through ball to Aguero for his second of the game, but you were mentioning Aguero. 201 goals so far in 293 matches. That's what you ask of a striker to score. Usually it's once every 2 games. Once every 2 games will get you around 20-plus goals a season and will get you in a great position as a striker for your team. It's going to get your team in great position. 201 goals in 293 matches. It's basically 2 goals every 3 games. And as a striker, you can't really ask for more.
Yeah, look, this is, I mentioned 2 weeks ago that this is coming on this month. In about 2 weeks now will be the 10th anniversary of the takeover at Manchester City when the money came in. And it took a few years for them to get moving and really moving in the right direction because ultimately they threw a whole bunch of money at a team that was mediocre, to be blunt. They weren't bad. They were a top-flight team, but they were mediocre. And it took a few years to figure themselves out, and ultimately what figured themselves out was the signing of Sergio Aguero, who is, I don't think he's inarguably the most important player that has ever played for that club. He took them from being mediocre to being rich and mediocre to being the Manchester City that we see today that wins championships, wins titles, and I think legitimately is a contender to win the Champions League finally this year. So this is, I think, a significant player that hit a significant milestone. Doesn't necessarily get the same amount of press as others around him anymore. He is likely at the end of the run for himself there, but as we saw, he's still a very effective player. And when I say the end of the run, this is, he's going to have a nice little, wherever he goes next, whether it be back to Argentina, whether, some China or MLS team takes a run at him, and
Japan,
NYCFC probably has some big eyes there thinking of that. But he's a player that's been very effective.
Yeah, Japan's the new China too, with Torres and what's his face, Iniesta being in Japan. You never know. But you're right. It was a good win for Manchester City. Aguero was able to showcase a 2-0 win against Chelsea. But we were talking about a goal scorer. And let's cross the pond and come back around here to Josef Martinez in the game against Toronto, which we'll break down very quickly in the Canadian Review. But he scored 2 more goals. He scored 2 goals against Montreal the week before. He scores 2 goals against Toronto. He's now at 26 goals this season, and the All-Star break just finished. He's 1 goal away from tying the season goal-scoring record that has a 3-way tie between Roy Lassiter, Chris Wondolowski, and Bradley Wright Phillips. He's going to beat that record probably next week.
And look, we'll talk about the first goal and the circumstances that surrounded it in the Canadian Review. He finished the penalty. That's what we'll say about it right now. But in terms of that second goal, the beautiful run, the timing, the way that he was able to dive and get on that ball perfectly, that's world class. And that's why he's scoring these type of goals. And TFC was playing very well defensively. And, I think they were a little shaken by, again, a call that we'll talk about in a bit. But nonetheless, it was, a very telling performance by him over the last couple of weeks, and particularly against TFC, which was a game that had the feel of a playoff game in some ways, because you were a desperate TFC, and I think you had an Atlanta team that really wanted to prove themselves against the defending champions, and it turned out to be quite the game. And Martinez was a full part in it. I mean, Alderone to me is the most important player, but maybe they're dirtiest too. We'll talk about that in a bit too. Lots of teasers, lots of spoilers here. But nonetheless, together this is a team that, and I tweeted this out while I was watching it, they're incredibly talented. They're the only team in Major League Soccer that I will say on paper you can argue is better than TFC or at least equal for sure. And to me, based on the combination of where they are in the standings right now and that factor and that talent factor, they're the favorites to win the MLS Cup at the halfway point for sure. And it's going to be very difficult. The MLS Cup is absolutely going to go through Atlanta one way or the other. And that headquarters is just licking their lips at the thought of 70,000 in that stadium, which isn't my cup of tea to watch soccer in. It seems a little rock and roll to me, but I know that it's exciting for a lot of people, so I'm not going to dismiss that. We saw the All-Star game there. That's my mention of it, and it was bright lights, and it got attention around the world for sure. I saw photographs of that walkout going, is this a video game or is this real life? Yeah. And that's what this is, and this is why I think MLS is enjoying it. And, lots of people will always suggest that teams like this get, a little bit of a break from MLS time to time, and I'm not here to argue against that. Maybe they do, because that's the type of league this is, but we'll deal with it, and you move forward. It was a great game. Martinez is certainly, he's going to shatter the record unless he gets hurt walking across the street today. Yeah,
which could always happen. Or it's MLS. At least one defender might be like, you know what? I'm going to make sure you don't break that record. We've seen that happen too. But one thing of that story that I think is fascinating to me is the influence of Tata Martino towards Josef Martinez and his play. Remember when Atlanta came into the league last year, we were talking about Miguel Almiron and how influential he was going to be and the big signing, the big man. Josef Martinez was a good signing, but he wasn't touted as the goal scorer or as prolific as he has been so far. And I was talking to Tata Martino last Saturday, not just the one that just passed, the one before when Atlanta was in Montreal, through a translator, of course, because I don't speak Spanish. Mi no habla español. Un poquito. But I was asking Tata Martino, Coach, how important is the role of an educator versus the role of a manager when you come into a team like this, when you start a team from scratch? And he mentioned something that was interesting to me. Like, at first, you always have your managerial instincts. So you come into a place and you start to manage, but then you look at different players and you notice where you can give them a little tips and tricks, educate them a bit on what your experience has been in the past, and give them a little push forward. And if we look at Atlanta over the last year and a half, majority of the players got a lot better since the beginning of the season in 2017. And the example for that is Josef Martinez. He is becoming world-class in many, many ways and could be playing in probably almost every single club in the world in first divisions across different leagues just because of his flair for the goal, his flair for scoring. He's not the tallest, but he still gets, I'm taller than him, but he still gets his head on great crosses and balls in the air. He's a threat from all across his assets, which I mean left foot, right foot, and head. He can score any ways he wants, and the role of Tata Martino in this, I think, is very important.
Yeah, look, and the teacher role of an MLS manager is vital. Absolutely. Patrick Vieira really embraced that as well, and we see Patrick Vieira move on at this point. And this is maybe a different circumstance here, but absolutely that is vital. Martino, when he came into the league last year, I did actually think that he had a chance to do this sort of stuff when I looked at the rest of that lineup and then looked at sort of his pedigree coming into it. But yeah, for sure, he has exceeded what expectations we have. I did peg him to be the newcomer of the year last year, if you roll back the tapes, but I didn't think 27 goals, right? I was thinking he might get 15, so over a whole season. So this has been quite the series this year. And as I say, the MLS Cup is going through that city right now. And they might not win it because it is a crapshoot when you get into that playoffs, and anything can happen, and anything does and has happened in the past. It's very rare that you see the double. TFC's record-breaking season of last year, the 69 points, and that's probably a jeopardy right now in terms of Atlanta's play. Although, look at the Red Bulls too, what they're sneakily doing on the side. There's stuff going on in the top end of the East that I don't think is getting as much attention as it should right now, and because I think we've been either focused on Atlanta or focused on what the hell's happening in Toronto and kind of ignoring those other good teams at the top, or what's happening in Columbus for different bad reasons.
Yeah.
And what are they doing with that, by the way? Are we going to get resolution on that soon? The longer this goes, the longer I think the Austin Bold might be the only team we're watching next year, and it's going to be one hell of a rivalry with the Times New Romans. But at any rate, where was it?
The font rivalry. That was a funny one.
Yeah.
One of the
italics.
I want Gothic, Gothic whatever, Gothic Italic to be a new team too. One of the biggest news in MLS since last week when we had our week off. We had some pre-recorded shows. Once again, thanks to all our guests and to Duane for their work and permits me to rest a little bit after a busy year. Fernando Adi was traded to Cincinnati. Interesting move. Cincinnati got their first DP for next year. But now the focus has shifted. Diego Valeri, talking just a few days before the All-Star game, saying, yeah, it's a great move for him. We're happy for him. And he's going to go to Cincinnati, but he's going to be loaned out to Montreal. Oh, really? Adi was in Cincinnati this weekend when they were playing in the USL. And it was announced by the club when the trade was done that Fernando Adi would play in the USL, but with the declaration of Diego Valeri mentioning that Adi will be loaned out to another MLS team to finish the season and then become the first DP of Cincinnati, it's interesting. The MLS USL trade, we've seen a new franchise, new club, a new expansion team, quote unquote, for next year, making a big move to a player that has been one of the best players of Portland over the last 4 or 5 years. And now he's going to have a second birth to his career, a rebirth maybe after a difficult season this year with Cincinnati. But the question is, will he be loaned out? And what does this trade do for MLS USL relationship, trades, possibility of getting players moved in, moved out, loaned in, loaned out? What do you think about this situation, Duane?
It is certainly interesting, and from Montreal's perspective, it would be a great pickup for the last half of the year. A bit weird, but a great pickup nonetheless. We talked about this Justin Merrim too, that they went after him and ended up not getting that one to line up. But I wonder what the reaction of the rest of the league will be to this from a couple perspectives. I mean, they look at all these expansion teams that are coming in and how they're starting so strongly right now, and almost would be willing to bet that behind the scenes there's a bit of a pushback on that now, particularly amongst the 96 teams. They're like, look, quit handing them all this stuff because they're basically killing us in our market. Why can't you be what they are? Well, we didn't have the advantages they are, and now we're 20 years in, and you can't just start from scratch, right? So there's might be some reaction to that and some resistance towards allowing these things to happen moving forward. It does, I think, also indicate something about what we should expect out of Cincinnati next year. I think they're probably going to go the domestic route in terms of building this team. And by domestic, I mean MLS experience route. And that's an interesting approach and a different approach than what Atlanta went and what LAFC went with, right? So maybe they're recognizing that they can't go in and compete at the same level as these teams because they don't have the same connections. And that's sort of a first indication of what this team's going to look like next year. In terms of Montreal side of this, I mean, that to me makes a big difference in terms of this playoff race. If they manage to get Audi, this would be immediately jumping in one of the best players in the league over the past couple of years into a team that's on the bubble in the playoffs. And if you're a team around them, you'd be like, how are they getting this lone player, a DP quality player, in as a $100,000 captain? And I imagine that's going to be pushed back upon a little bit, but the rules are there to allow it. Then Montreal's full measure to them if they can take advantage of it.
And we're still waiting for this to actually unfold. It might not unfold, and Adi could actually play the rest of the season in the USL, get accustomed to Cincinnati. That's always a possibility too. But those are the words of Diego Valeri, so we'll see where that goes. And before we take a little break and come back with the Canadian review, Duane, I wanted to just to mention a bit the lackluster MLS transfer market so far. There's 2 days left. It's closing on August 8th. And we have seen a lot of talk. We have seen a lot of rumors that haven't come to fruition. Of course, the Jimmy Briand story that we talked a week and a half ago. But there's a lot of other similar situation across the league. Is the summer window becoming, I wouldn't say obsolete, but is the winter window, which used to be the less popular one, now becoming the most popular one for teams to get big names?
I think it has a lot to do with the competition that you're in this particular year. It has probably as much to do with the World Cup as anything else. And the World Cup does a couple things. It creates sort of a freeze across the board on the market because, a lot of the big names have to move before the middle names and the smaller names can start to move. And, until that shakes out, I think it affects the entire market down the line. And the World Cup just slows that down. I also think that after a lot of bad buys, following World Cups over the past years, that some of the bigger clubs are a little more reluctant to jump into the market in a World Cup year. They want to see it play out. From an MLS perspective, they always are going to be at a disadvantage in the summer months because they're competing against, the Real Madrids of the world to sign players, right? And they can't compete against that. They're just at the same, they're in the same postal code, but not at the same table. Right, so that's something that, or zip code. Sorry, we have a lot of American listeners. It's it's something that makes a challenge for them. The January window is the European teams are less involved in it. It's the MLS offseason. It allows you to bring a player in to fully transition to your roster. So, the thing about MLS too is that the internal transfer doesn't close till September. So there is still time to tweak your team, and you could still sign a player that's out of contract. And that is another thing that a lot of MLS teams will do in the summer is they'll wait until it's closed. That way they're then in an advantage when they're talking to a player who's out of contract because, we're offering you a chance to play, which you sign a year or an 18-month contract with us, maybe you can get back to Europe. And then that, I think, makes people more open to coming over here because their options have been closed for them over there. So they're like, okay, well, I want to rebuild my career. Here's an option, right? So that's another thing to look for.
It makes a lot of sense. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll do our Canadian review.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at SoccerTodaySPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.
And we're back on Soccer Today. You can follow Duane on social media at 24th Minute and myself at Kev Laramee. Draws galore in Major League Soccer north of the border, at least for the Canadian teams. Last weekend, Duane, for the first time since May 2017, the Montreal Impact drew a game at home. This time against DC United for a 1-1 draw. Toronto draw 2-2, and Vancouver drawn 2-2. Drew, yeah, I've been coming off of vacation, so give me a break here. So yeah, 2-2, 2-2, and 1-1. I guess Canada ties this weekend.
2-2. It's like a ballet thing, right? So, did the Impact fans know what to do when the game ended? Did they understand what a draw meant at this point? I mean, they wouldn't seen a draw in their sports in a long time because the Abs can't draw. So
no, and the Alouettes can't score. So we're talking about a difficult year and a half in Montreal sports, and it's just continuing. At least the Impact is probably the most successful.
You got Johnny Football now.
Who? Johnny what? Oh, Johnny Canadian Football. Yeah, I have no idea what you're talking about. But let's just go with Montreal. 1-1. Mancosu scored his second goal in 3 weeks after scoring just one goal before that. And the Montreal Impact had the early lead in that game. Yamil Assad, one of the good players last year from Atlanta that has moved on and benefited from their great season in Atlanta, now with DC United, scored the goal for DC United. And I guess the fans were happy. It was a sellout crowd to see Wayne Rooney, I imagine, in Montreal. And 1-1 draw. A bit of a anticlimactic, or I would use another word that's maybe not necessarily politically correct, but yeah, it was a bit of a wet blanket.
Yeah, well, yeah. The Rooney situation, I mean, he had a great start, I think, but his coming off the bench in that first game really allowed him to excel. And the more he's been playing since, the more and Rudy and I talked about this last week in the conversation that we had. It's been kind of uneven, his start. And I think that should make everyone happy, because everyone that either side of the Rudy debate is got something they can point to and say that they're right, because he hasn't been terrible, but he hasn't been particularly spectacular either. But I do think that said, if you look at DC United's overall play since he's come on, I think he makes them a little bit better for sure. So I think overall it's been a positive, and obviously he's selling tickets. Apparently there's United fans all over the world, right? So I've heard that they're a fairly popular club. I don't know why. They don't win much anymore. So
I don't know why, but yeah, no. Again, 1-1. The other interesting matchup this weekend was in Atlanta. 2-2 between Atlanta United and Toronto FC, with a late red card to Chris Mavinga, which will be suspended for the next game. But we teased it earlier. Duane, tell us about the call.
Well, which one? The penalty or the fact that the referee missed a player spit on someone? I mean, there's a lot to talk about in this game, and it got testy. Like I said, it had a playoff vibe to it. It makes sense. Toronto is the defending champions. They're getting healthy again. There's a lot of talent on the pitch. They went down there looking at this hotshot team that's staring down and looking at the possibility of taking a run at their record, and they wanted to make a marker to say, we're back and here we go on the road to say we can do this. Atlanta's saying we are that last year is gone. It's not 2017 anymore. That's, Sebastian Javenko said that back in March here in Toronto, but just as a reminder, Atlanta wanted to say it again. We are the top team now. We are the team to beat now. We are you last year. So they want to put a marker down. And the styles matched very well. Toronto wanted to create. Atlanta wanted to pounce. And Atlanta is so fast, so incredibly fast, and they take advantage of that field. Their home advantage is incredible. And if they can get the MLS Cup in that stadium, they win it. Like that, I don't think there's anyone that can really compete with them at home in a championship type setting, because their speed and their ability to finish off the chances with their top end talent at the top is unmatched at this particular point. So we saw it play out in front of our eyes, and then as the game got deeper, it got dirtier. And when dirty games happen, things happen. And look, there is video out there that shows all their own spitting. Whether or not it is a little blurry, but that motion of the mouth is unmistakable what he's doing. And if you're an Atlanta fan listening to this, sometimes your players do bad things, and you just need to accept that they sometimes do bad things, and maybe they'll get away with it. This isn't me being bitter or whatever. That's not why the game ended up in 2-2. The penalty call, however, is maybe the most bizarre penalty I've ever seen called. I have watched it 60 times, and I do not understand what they are calling. Bono clearly made the save. Clearly the contact was initiated by the attacker after the save had been made, and they still called a penalty. I don't know what you do differently as the goalkeeper in that position other than to not try and save it. And are they seriously going to make goaltending illegal?
Yeah.
You can get a foul by if you endanger the play. Like, okay, I'm famous for this, and it's usually you're talking about a defender when you do it, but just, getting the ball does not negate the possibility of fouling someone, 100%. But it does if you don't make a motion towards the player in terms of to initiate the contact, then it is in fact not a penalty, and that is just a bizarre decision. The fact that VAR held it up is even more infuriating if you're watching this, and it's infuriating from a TFC partisan perspective, but I think anyone who's just a football fan should look at that and go, or any other team should look at that and go, what the hell are you calling? Like, what is the standard that we need to follow so we can follow it? Because I know TFC is going to lose its mind because they have been on the wrong side of a lot of VAR decisions this year that don't make sense from their perspective. And from any neutral perspective, you can make the argument that they don't make sense. So this is just another one, and they're going to start to feel that the league's like trying to slap them down for having too good of a year last year or something. Like I don't believe that's happening, but I could see someone that's a little more conspiracy theory ridden, and there are people in this league that are believing that because they have been on the wrong side a lot on the VAR decisions this year.
Whatever happened to VAR, it like disappeared off the face of the earth, just like Alicia Silverstone. But that's an old reference that probably no one gets. To finish the show quickly,
Alicia Silverstone.
Exactly, right? What happened? Anyways, to finish the show, Vancouver 2-2. But what I want to talk about out of this game is not the result, not the game itself, is the non-play of Kai Kamara. Kai Kamara has been rumored to be on his way out of Vancouver. He is an asset that Vancouver could monetize for this transfer or trade window and be able to get something out of it. Vancouver will have some sort of rotation in the offseason. We already know that Alphonso Davies is going to Munich. And if Kai Kamara was a stopgap solution for this year, and if they find a way to trade him and get either high draft pick, TAM, or GAM money, it might be worth it as well. And Kai Kamara was not dressed for the game this weekend, which says a lot because he's healthy right now. So what could happen? Where could Kai Kamara go? And of course, Montreal has been linked with pretty much every single player available in this league so far, so that's an option. But it's interesting to see maybe Vancouver trying to get either some money or high draft picks to be able to do a bit of a roster overhaul this offseason coming in the winter.
Flip them straight for Oduro. There you go. Two people that don't fit anymore. Kamara, the problem with him is at this point in time, he's kind of burnt a lot of bridges, and who knows what's happening behind the scenes. This could just be Vancouver being clueless in terms of their direction at the moment, which seems to be their case a lot of late. But it also could be that there's just some disconnect that we're not hearing about, and you never know with this player. And when this signing happened, I think we both were a little bit hesitant to embrace it. We looked at it and objectively went, okay, well, we get it, but I'm going to have to see this play out, and it hasn't played out very well. He'll have a okay start there, I think, but a healthy cut. This is not a player that, Vancouver's, their season is not going to script. We talked to Simon last week. If you haven't listened to that interview, go back. It's very in-depth, and he agreed, and we talked to Rudy about this, and he agreed, and we've been talking about it for months. It's just directionless, the Whitecaps right now. They don't know where they are or who they are, and they have a lot of decisions to make in the near future with that money they're getting through Davies, that they're going to have to make some choices and get some direction quickly, because otherwise they're going to squander that. You have to have a plan, and I don't know if they do.
Yep, exactly. Thanks again for listening and staying with us during our vacation last week. We are back Monday to Friday at 10 a.m. live on our YouTube page, youtube.com/sports podcasting network. Make sure you hit that red button in the bottom of your screen and make sure you click the notification bell to be notified as soon as we go live on a daily basis. As always, you can follow Duane on social media at 24th Minute and myself at Kev Laramee. We will be back tomorrow with another edition of Soccer Today. And until then, have a great soccer.
You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.